Welcome back to Alpine Garage Sports. We had something exciting happen today. Colorado football, actually all of Pac-12 schedules came out today. So what does that mean? Why is that a big deal? Well, the big deal is that now we know, we kind of knew who we were going to play, but we didn't know in what order. And in this particular case, a lot of the back end of the schedule kind of get mixed up. I thought USC was going to be a later game, but it actually is more of in the middle of the season. So that's going to be pretty significant. Now, let's start with saying that last year, Colorado, we all know, was 1-11, and we had one of the worst seasons that we've had in years. Not that we've had great seasons in the past years, but 1-11 is pretty bad. Now we've got a new coach, we've got a new team, basically new coaches, everything. So we're starting from scratch. But there are a lot of teams on this list that are starting from scratch as well. We're going to go through each game and do a small breakdown of what we're looking at when we're competing against them. Let's start out with number one, the first game of the year, the elephant in the room, which is TCU. We knew this was going to be the first game. For a second, Arizona State was going to jump it, but the reality is TCU is our first game. And even though they lost Max Duggan, they are still a very, very difficult team to beat, and ending up number 2 in the country last year, I don't know that they're going to be far off of their game. Now, the things about TCU that you should know is that Chandler Morris, who was the starting quarterback this year that had beat Max Duggan out for the starting job, got injured very early. In fact, I think it was the first game of the season, and was replaced by Max Duggan, and then the rest is history. So he is still a very good, Chandler is still a very good quarterback. And he may even be better this next year. We know that the rest of the team is going to be good. And right now, TCU is number 21 in the 247 composite overall ranking for recruiting. So that includes everything with recruiting. That's number 21 in the country. So it sounds like they're going to hold their spot as far as the talent is concerned. So that's going to be a very difficult game on game one. This is the hard thing when you're talking about the first 2 games of the season. You're talking about TCU. So if we end up 0-1, let's say, against TCU, is that going to be a big deal? Because they were number 2 last year. So is that really a letdown? I don't really think it is. But if we are 1-0 after TCU, oh man, we may blow the doors off this thing. So that's a big one to watch. Now, number 2, and the one that I'm looking forward to the most, is the Nebraska game. Here's the reason why. So I am an old Colorado buff fanatic from way back in the 80s. And Nebraska was always the big game for Colorado, obviously because it's kind of like an in-state rivalry, but it's connecting states because they're the next state over. And Nebraska has always been good. So even when we were good in the late 80s, early 90s, and all through the 90s, Nebraska was the number 1 to number 5 team in the country during that entire span. So those games were always big games. Now, since Nebraska has changed conferences and we changed conferences, we don't play all that often, and at this point, the rivalry is lost. But now it's going to start back up again, and here's the reason why. Nebraska has a brand new head coach, which we know is Matt Rhule, who came from an NFL coaching job. And so he is bringing, his offensive coordinator is also bringing a pro-style offense. So you're going to have a lot of smash mouth running to progress the ball. It's going to be a really aggressive offense. And their quarterback from this year, Casey Thompson, is returning. They also have Chubba Purdy basically competing for the job as well. So there's going to be a lot of competition there. And with Nebraska being number 30 in composite recruiting overall, they're going to be fielding a good team. Matt Rhule is doing the same thing in Nebraska that Coach Prime is doing in Colorado, only doing it from a different angle. So we should expect Nebraska to be a much better team next year. And with a pro-style offense, it's probably going to be different than most of the teams are going to be playing. So that is the big one. Now, are we going to be 2-0 or 0-2 or 1-1? That's difficult to say at this point. So let's just go to the third game of the season. The third game of the season is CSU. So that's our in-state rival, Colorado State University. They ended up 3-9 this year. Early in the year, you guys may not have seen this because not a lot of people were watching Colorado football this year. But there was a time when ESPN came out and said that Colorado football, not the University of Colorado, but all of Colorado football was the worst in the country. CSU and CU were terrible this year. And that stung pretty hard because even though I'm not a CSU fan, it obviously is a Colorado school, so I root for them when they're playing other teams in a lot of cases. But we were bad this year. So What have they done in the offseason? Not a lot. I mean, they're still ranked really low in recruiting, and they never scored more than 19 points last year. So the offense is just kind of stifled. There isn't a whole lot of movement there. They do have a quarterback, Jackson Brasso. Anyway, 3-star quarterback Jackson Brasso is going to be joining. Now, he's a big dude, 6'5". So if he is any good at all, which it sounds like he is, this could be a better game than it has been in the past. Honestly, I don't think this is going to be a big hiccup. I think we're probably going to beat CSU this year. And that's, so now we at least won that game, right? Now we get into the thick of the schedule because we have a run with teams that have that had a really good season in 2022. Now, the number 4 game is going to be against Oregon. Now, Oregon this year was 10-3. They had a great team, and they ended up 15th in the country. So 15th in the country, and really, I think they're going to get better this year because they're number 11 in recruiting this year. Just outstanding. Bo Nix has stated that he is going to return, so they're going to have their awesome quarterback. With being ranked high in recruiting and having your all-star quarterback coming back, I don't see any reason why they aren't going to be in the top, maybe even the top 10 next year. So this is going to be a tough game. Okay, now this is a game that the number 5 game is USC. This is a game that I said is going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest game of the year for CU. And we've already mentioned TCU, we've mentioned Nebraska, and we've mentioned Oregon, and still USC could be the biggest game of next year. Let's say we make it through this top half. Maybe we're 2-2 or 3-1. Maybe we're 4-0 and we go and see USC. So I am an OU guy. My guy, Lincoln Riley, is going to be in his 2nd season there. He had a great first season. It should have turned out better for him than it did, but still a great season overall. And not only that, but they have the number 8 overall recruiting ranking this season already. So they're signing 5-star recruits. It seems like daily now. Now, one of the big deals is that they've lost Caleb Williams, but they signed 5-star Malachi Nelson, quarterback, which is, I'm not going to say an upgrade from Caleb Williams because you don't want to say that, Heisman Trophy winner, but man, he is good. He is a good quarterback. And a name like Malachi is like one of the best names for quarterbacks, Malachi. I mean, that's awesome. And a lot of that number 8 ranking is the fact that they are really investing a lot into their defense. So when you're talking a 5-star quarterback throwing the ball and their defense is going to potentially be better than last year, they may actually make a run into the top 5 next year, and this is going to be a very tough game. Lincoln Riley is a great play caller. There's no reason why we shouldn't think that they're going to be very tough to beat next year. Now, number 6 game, Stanford. Now, Stanford had a terrible year this year. They were 3-9, but there is light at the end of the tunnel for them because they picked up a 4-star quarterback in Myles Jackson. Now, there's been a lot of press on Myles Jackson. He's going to be a great quarterback, I think, for Stanford. They have to do a lot more than that, and their recruiting rankings aren't very high. So I don't know that Stanford is really going to be making a big push next year. I could be wrong, but that one may be another one where we may actually pull that game. Now, the dark horse, Arizona State, 3-9 last year. So from the onlook of it, it doesn't look like a very tough game, but something strange just happened. Jaden Rashada, who is the quarterback, that 5-star quarterback that had committed to Florida and now is decommitting from Florida, is actually talking about Arizona State. And the reason why is because his dad played defensive back there, and the coach for Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham, actually recruited him when he was at Oregon. When Kenny was at Oregon, he actually recruited him. So there is some hands into this team here for Jaden, and there is a possibility that he might go there. It may be a little bit of a long shot, but if he does, Arizona State could be a team that we need to look at for next year. All right, UCLA, 9-4 last year, so not a bad season. The other thing, too, is they're number 23 in recruiting this year, so they have actually had a really good recruiting class. And they signed 5-star quarterback Dante Moore. So Dante Moore, that was big news. It was huge news. In fact, he flipped to go to UCLA from Oregon, I believe it was. So now he's got new life at quarterback. They've got a really good recruiting class. and they had a good season last year to begin with. So we're already looking at a team that may be tough to beat next year. Number 8 is Oregon State. Now, Oregon State, again, another sleeper, 10-3, had a great season, and they actually signed the top quarterback in the transfer portal, DJU. I can't say his last name very easily, so DJU from Clemson actually signed with him. So Oregon State, again, is another team that at 10-3 was already good, and now they have a world-class quarterback that's coming in on the transfer portal. They could be phenomenal next year. So far, you can see this is going to be a tough schedule. Then the number 9 game is Arizona. Now, Arizona is a top 50 recruiting class so far. They're number 50, but we'll call it top 50 recruiting class. So they're not doing bad in their recruiting. They have a new 4-star quarterback in Brayden Dorman, who is coming to Arizona. So this could be another team that can spike up with additional offense. But just from the looks of things, probably isn't at 5-7 last year. They're probably not anything that we need to really be worried about at this point. Another team for the end of the season at 7-6 was Washington State last year. They're 7-6. And they're number 61 in the recruiting portal, so still a decent recruiting class. And they have Cameron Ward returning at quarterback. So not a lot seems to be changing there. Not a great recruiting class. Same quarterback they had last year. Probably very similar results if something else doesn't change. So that one is not a game that I think we should be focusing on. The last game of the season is going to be against Utah. Now, Utah has won the last 2 Pac-12 championships. So this is a team, obviously, we need to look at. They ended the year ranked number 10. They have a number 26 overall recruiting ranking, which is just behind CU. And Cam Rising is returning. So you have a potential Heisman that's on a team that's won back-to-back Pac-12 championships. And they have a good recruiting class. So we may have one of the tougher games of the season at the end of the season. In fact, who do you think, put down in the comments, who do you think, let's say that it's too early to tell, but let's say we have a good season and we're actually going to be playing in the Pac-12 championship next year. We're going to be playing USC in their last year in the Pac-12, or we're going to be playing Utah, their 3rd straight Pac-12 championship game that they're going to be in. Or is Oregon or UCLA going to be in that game? All of those teams look good. This is going to be an extremely tough schedule for CU, and one that obviously we are going to need a great coach, great coaching staff, and a great recruiting class. All of that seems to be the case. So there's no reason why we could not be ranked pretty high in the Pac-12 at the end of the season. I don't know that we're going to win every game, but because this is one of the toughest schedules that I've seen in a while for CU. So tell me what you think about this schedule, the independent schools that we're playing, the changes that I talked about in these schools, because some of these schools were not very good last year, but with the recruiting class they're bringing in and a change at quarterback, and sometimes even a change at coach, are going to make the difference. Like Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska could be like CU, and they could go from nothing to something in 1 year just because they put a new coach in place. And then you have teams like UCLA, who was number 21 last year, but now they have one of the best quarterbacks in the country playing for them. That's a wrap from Alpine Garage. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're going to go deeper into this schedule. This was just kind of an overview of kind of what we're looking at right now with the talent prospects for these different schools that we're going to be playing, and our potential chances about winning some of these games and where we stand in there. I appreciate you hanging out. Please put your comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. We're going to be forging forward this year, following Coach Prime closely and bringing you all of the relevant news that pertains to how well we're going to do this year and the culture that Prime is bringing to Boulder, Colorado. We're going to be on the ground this year in Boulder at every home game. Please subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and you guys are being very generous to us. And the comments that we're getting are unbelievable. I love the feedback. Let's get this thing going. Let's talk Colorado football. We coming.